At the start of the Apex Predators devlog season, I made a video about my thoughts on the introduction of Rank 8 aircraft, and at the end of that video I asked you all if you want to follow up where I think War Thunder is headed in the future, and the answer was a resounding yes. So here's where I think War Thunder is headed in 2023 and beyond. I'll start with aircraft because that was the main focus of the Apex Predators update. The first thing that I have to bring up is that Gaijin have confirmed that the Tornado ADV, or Air Defense variant, is coming to War Thunder, so there's no speculating about that. We also got a pretty major data mine when it comes to aircraft, and I think that we'll get a whole update around this. That is the introduction of AIM-120 AMRAAMs and electronic countermeasures. Now, this is an update that could come sooner or later depending on how Gaijin want to play it. The argument for AMRAAMs coming sooner is that the F-16s found in game are all Block 15s with the Operation Capability Upgrade, which were the first F-16s that used AMRAAMs. We know that the F-16s in game are Block 15 OCUs because they use the Pratt & Whitney F100 PW220 engine, which isn't found on any of the earlier models. And we know that's not a later version of the F-16 in game because they don't have the larger horizontal stabilizers of later models. So AMRAAMs could come any update. The argument for why AMRAAMs won't be coming for a while is also compelling. AMRAAMs weren't introduced until 1991. If Gaijin were to skip right to that, then they'd be passing over the releases of some very popular aircraft such as the F-15 in 1976, the F-18 in 1984, and the Su-27 also in 1984. But that doesn't really mean much because the F-16 Block 15 OCU that we have in game wasn't introduced until 1988, so in a way Gaijin already skipped those aircraft. I don't know what order we're going to get these updates, but I think that we're going to see more of these versus updates like what we got with Apex Predators. I could see one being the F-15 versus the MiG-25, and mark my words, one of the future updates is going to be the F-18 versus Su-27. They were both introduced into service in 1984, they're both still in use today, and they're both wildly popular aircraft. Next, let's move on to talking about Naval, because that's the other branch where we got massive data mines during the Apex Predators dev server. Just to show how big this news was on the Naval leak, the French Navy got leaked, and it was just a side piece to the news that everybody else was talking about. People have been vocal about wanting the French Navy since the introduction of Naval, and every update I see at least a few people asking about it. But that was all overshadowed because we got a data mine of voice lines for submarines. This is not the first time that we've had submarines in the game. The April Fool's event in 2018 was called Silent Thunder. In that mode, you took control of modern American, Russian, or British submarines and played this game pinging other subs with sonar and guiding torpedoes to get hits. For years, I've heard that player sentiment around that mode was very negative, and I've had conversations with people just a few months ago where I said that I doubt that submarines would ever make it into War Thunder. With these recent data mines, I'm willing to admit that I was wrong because there is no way that Gaijin would go through the effort to get dozens of submarine-specific voice lines for nearly half the countries in the game without some plan on using them. The voice lines were vague enough that I can't tell if we're going to get World War II era submarines or if Gaijin's going to skip to more modern ones, but either way, I think Gaijin will have to change up the gameplay from how it was in Silent Thunder or people are just not going to like it again. As someone who's played more Naval than most, here's how I'd have it go down if I had control over the Naval mode. First, I'd round out the existing Blue Water tree with World War II battleships and maybe some post-war ships. From interviews that Gaijin's had with the Japanese publishers of War Thunder, we know that World War II battleships are in the works. Alongside that, I'd introduce a new naval tree. This would be for more modern ships. I'd have it start with ships around the 70s or 80s because that's where you have the big introduction of missile destroyers and where ships started to move away from having guns as their primary way of fighting. This is such a huge paradigm shift that I just don't think that it would work in the current system that War Thunder has for naval. I'd also have this new Blue Water tree start a much higher battle rating, probably around 8 or 9, and I'd require players to have aircraft in rank 5 or 6 or higher to unlock. This would allow Gaijin to simultaneously work on finding information that's out there but hard to find for older ships, while also working on newer ships where the information may still be classified, so Gaijin would just have to guess on some of the stats anyways. As much as I'd love to talk about ways that I'd try to fix naval, I still know that the likelihood of Gaijin putting this much effort into a mode that less than 10% of the player base plays is very low. Although maybe if Gaijin put more effort into it and introduced something like a modern tree, then more people would play naval. Now to round this video off with good old tanks. Honestly, I think that with each update, Gaijin is getting into more and more of a tough spot with tanks. Quite frankly, they're running out of top tier tanks to add. That's why in my other video, I said that Gaijin should just detach the battle ratings of planes from tanks and just let the plane BR go higher and higher. At the current rate, I think the Gaijin will have to start adding more prototypes and tech demonstrators to meaningfully expand the current tech trees. The only other way that I could see that Gaijin could keep expanding the roster is to add more countries as either full tech trees or sub trees. The problem with that approach is that very quickly you'd run out of countries that have unique designs, and we'd run into another Finland problem where most of the vehicles being added are just copy and paste. I'm not as concerned about copy paste vehicles as most people, but I could see that very quickly wearing down on the player base. Gaijin is bound to add upgrade versions of top tier tanks that we have in games such as the AMRAAMs SEP V2, 3, and 4, and tanks such as the T90M, but they're going to run out of upgrades much sooner than later. I may not know how Gaijin is going to add a whole ton more tanks to War Thunder, but here's a video where I show you how to shoot better with them, and here's a video that YouTube thinks that you'll like.